All right, Javosai, good morning. Good morning. Let's begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors. Sorry. For 1 second. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, Sammy and Malka Esterson, for dedicating the Shurim and Drashos this month in memory of their parents, commemoration of the yahrzeits, Yitzchak, Laib, Ben Aharon, HaKohen, Ludwig, Stiefel, Sarah Rachel, Bas Baruch, Avraham, Sarah Stiefel, Hinda, Bas Henech, Efraim, Hinda, Esterson. We hope down to the merit of our Talmud Torah. The Neshamas will have an Aliyah and the family a Nechama. We thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating the Week of Learning in memory of Paul's sister, Simone Julie Pollack, Zachrini Shulamis, Bas Shmuel. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, and the Sham will have an Aliyah and the family in Nechama. And to thank Josh and Malki Rosenblum for dedicating the shir this morning in honor of their son Yehuda putting on tefillin today. Mazel tov, Shvizoch Emeretz Hashem. Shvach Shvizoch, Shvizoch, to see much nachas from Yehuda as he grows to become a bar mitzvah. Emeretz Hashem Me'evesim Sharim Tovos. But with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Chav Test 29. We have a beautiful and incredible daf ahead of us. Just a little bit of the plan for this week. Emeretz Hashem, as you know, this is the last week of Rosh Hashana. Emeretz Hashem, we are going to finish the Masechta. The Masechta actually finishes on Shabbos. I'm not going to be here Shabbos. I have a family simcha. My brother's making a bar mitzvah this Shabbos. So thank you. So our goal, Emeretz Hashem, is we're actually going to finish the Gemara Emeretz Hashem on Erev Shabbos. So you will notice again, the last half of the Masechta is only a little piece of Ondalef. Now, to be clear, that does not mean that Shabbos, it's not enough Shabbos. Right? I want to be very clear about that. It's not enough Shabbos. But what it will do is give you an opportunity to chazer a little bit, to get ready for Maseches Tainis, and then Emeretz Hashem will be back from Sunday morning. We'll never miss the beginning of Tainis. We'll start Tainis and Emeretz Hashem together on Sunday morning, but that's going to be our plan. So, and we'll see what happens with Reb Tzaddik this week in Emeretz Hashem. We love Reb Tzaddik, we need Reb Tzaddik, but we may have to, we'll play with the schedule a little bit. So we'll say, with that, let us begin. This coming attraction. So it's going to be an exciting, rigorous, uplifting week. So we'll say, today's daf is Chav Tes 29. And we are picking up on the bottom of Chav Ches Amud Beis 28b. Literally the last couple of words. Amar Rabbi Zera l'Shamei. Shavuos saying yesterday's daf. We were learning. Yesterday was challenging here in the afternoon. It was a very tired daf. It was a very mamish, but Baruch Hashem, we did it. We did it. So the Gemara. So remember again, we were talking about the din of kavana. What level of kavana, what level of concentration is necessary? And remember, there's two dimensions of kavana. There's kavana of what we call the shomea, the person listening to the tkiyas, and what the Gemara calls the mashmiya, which we would call the Baal Tokea, the person blowing the shofar. So the Gemara says as follows, I'm the Rabbi Zera l'Shamei. Rabbi Zera said to his attendant, top of Chav Tes, Echavein v'tokeli. Do me a favor, go ahead and have kavana and blow the shofar for me. Look at Rashi, top Rashi, Chav Tes Amud Aleph. Ichavin v'tokeli, tiskavin litkoa b'shmi lo tzini dechabasi. So this is very interesting. So Rabbi Zera said his attendant, who also apparently was his Baal Tokea, blow the shofar and have in mind to be motzimi. In other words, have in mind specifically for me. Ichavin v'tokeli. So what do you see from here? Alma kasavar mashmiya by kavana. What you see from here is, interestingly enough, it's not enough just for the listener to have kavana, but what? The Baal Tokea also has to have kavana. Both parties have to have kavana. So the Gemara says, Meisel Reza Kasha, Haya over Achori Besak Neses, Oshaya Beso Samach Besak Neses, Shamakol Shofar, Komagila. This is the Mishnah. Yeah, what's wrong with the Mishnah? The Mishnah made it sound like if you happen to be walking by the shul, or your home is next to the shul, and you hear them blowing shofar. What's the halacha, or Megillah for that matter? Im kivin libo yatsa, ve'im lav lo yatsa. Halacha l'maisa, if you had kavana to be yotze with the tekiyas coming from the shul, you're yotze. And if you don't have kavana, meaning you being the shomea, the listener, then you're not yotze. Ve'im lav lo yatsa. So the Gemara says, but 1 second. Interestingly enough, the Mishnah only discusses kavana from whose perspective? From whose perspective? The shomea, the listener. So the Gemara says, "My havi heich lo kama chavina daita didei." But who? Even if I, the listener, have kavana, the Baal Tokea in the shul doesn't have kavana for me. And it sounded like, based on this episode of Rabbi Zera, that both parties have to have kavana. Both the shomea, the listener, as well as the Baal Tokea. Yet when you read the Mishnah only seems to put the obligation of kavana ultimately upon the shomea, the listener, and not the mashmiya, the Baal Tokea. To which the Gemara says, hacha b'shliach tzibur askinon. I will say, what are we talking about? What's the case in the Mishnah? The case in the Mishnah is not just any stam Baal Tokea, but rather this guy is the shliach tzibur. He is appointed to blow the shofar on behalf of the kehilla. And I will say, when you are a shliach tzibur, the daite akule alma. Ultimately, again, you have in mind to be motzi anyone who is going to hear you. So I will say, this is actually a very important halacha on a number of levels. So first of all, in general, the way it works is the Baal Tokeh, the person blowing the shofar, has this level of kavanah. His specific intent is as follows, that I have in mind to be motzi anyone who is going to hear my tikkios. Right? That's the kavanah that a Baal Tokeh has before he blows the shofar. Now the interesting part about that is, that's obviously a certain degree of non-specific intent. Right, but halacha l'maisa, you could have that level of kavana. That's the Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah brings it down. That's the kavana the Baal Tokeh has to have before he blows the shofar. I'll also tell you something else. It tells you what it means to be a shliach tzibur, and this is why it's a little bit different today. But when you look at the Shulchan Aruch, there are so many halachos concerning who should be the shliach tzibur. Who should be right? What does it mean to be a shliach tzibur? And part of the din of being a shliach tzibur is you cannot have negative feelings towards anyone in the tzibur. It's hard to find shluchei tzibur, right? But why? But why is that? Because the din of a shaliach tzibur is the daite akule alma. We'll say is again. That's why having a sweet voice is one part of it, but being a bal midos tovos, being someone who's mu'urav mabrios, being someone who's able to get along with people, that is a din in being a shliach tzibur. Because when you're a shliach tzibur, the daite akule alma, your das has to be for everyone who's being yotzei with you. That's the Baal Tokea, that's the Shliach Tzibor, and also the truth is, I think you could extend it. What it also represents is anyone, you see, the Shliach Tzibor is in a position of leadership and authority, right? The Shliach Tzibor leads the Tzibor from the Amid. And the truth is, it's any time that a person is in a position of authority, a position of leadership, it only works if the daite akule alma. The daite akuli alma. That you have to have das to serve everyone. You see, sometimes the difference between elected officials and let's say leadership, communal leadership, Jewish leadership, any communal leadership, is elected officials, all you need is 51%. Right? That's all you need. And the other 49%, the truth is it actually doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In Jewish leadership, in communal leadership, the din, whether you're the shliach tzibur or you're any other kind of leader, the daite akuli alma, you can't make everyone happy. You can never make everyone happy. But my das has to be that I want to serve everyone. Can I serve everyone? Will I serve everyone? Will I be able to impactfully lead everyone? Probably not. But my das is akuli alma. So therefore, I will say, what the Gemara is suggesting is as follows. There's essentially two different types of Baal Tokeh, which is really amazing. There's a shliach tzibur Baal Tokeh, and there's a private Baal Tokeh. Rabbi Zera's case was a case of a private Baal Tokeh. So in a private Baal Tokeh, Rabbi Zera says to his attendant, blow the shofar for me, that type of Baal Tokeh requires what we'll call reciprocal kavanah. The shomea, the listener, has to have kavanah, and the mashmir, the Baal Tokeh, has to have kavanah. In what we'll call a communal Baal Tokeh, or better stated, a shliach tzibur Baal Tokeh, that type of person has in mind that halacha l'maisa, anyone who hears his kolos is going to be yotzei with his kolos. Incredible. Tashma, niskavin shura, niskavin mashmiya. Bless you. If halacha l'maisa, the listener had kavana and the Baal Tokeh did not, or niskavin mashmiya, or niskavin shomea, or the Baal Tokeh had kavana and the listener did not, lo yatsa. Ad she is kavin shomea umashmiya. But say so again. Bryce says up until sounds like over here everyone needs kavana. Katani mashmiya dumya de shomea. So interestingly enough, in this Bryce we are equating the shomea, the listener, with the Baal Tokeh. The Gemara says mas shomea liatzmo. Just like the shomea, who is he listening for? I will say, right? Who is the listener listening for? Himself. Af mashmiya liatzmo. So to the Baal Tokea in this particular brayso is also someone who's blowing privately. In other words, he's blowing for an individual. Vikatani lo yatsa. So I will say, so again, the Gemara is highlighting this distinction. It's fascinating between what we'll call a private Baal Tokea versus a communal Baal Tokea. A private Baal Tokea requires reciprocal kavana, and ultimately communal Baal Tokea, we assume that since he's a shliach tzibor, the daite akule alma. So tonight, Gemara says, in reality, this is a machlokes tanoim. This anya shomea liatzmo umashmiya lefi darko. Supposed to listen to this lashon. So the Gemara says, a shomea has to have, right, the listener has to have specific intent to be yotzei. But the mashmiya lefi darko. So we'll say, what does mashmiya lefi darko mean? The Baal Tokea, he doesn't have in mind for someone specific. Who does he have in mind for? Lefi darko means whoever hears him. Whoever hears him. In other words, his kavana is, I am willing to be motzi anyone who hears my tekiyas. So Rabbi Yossi Mendra, when is this true? B'shliach tzibor. Oh, when is that true? With the Baal Tokea, who is a shliach tzibor Baal Tokea. Aval b'yochid lo yatsa. But I will say, if halacha l'maisa, I'm just going ahead and being motzi. I'm not about to being motzi. He's just one other person. Lo yatsa achi is kavin shomea u'mashmiya. So we'll say, it turns out that the maskon of the Gemara is something amazing. In a case of a private Baal Tokea, and when I say private Baal Tokea means there's one shomea, there's one mashmiya, or by the way, it doesn't just have to be one, right? Private Baal Tokea, we'll say, is what type of situation? Anytime where what? There's a clearly defined group. In that case, halacha l'maisa, that requires reciprocal kavana. In the shliach tzibor Baal Tokea, it's understood that Baal Tokea's kavana is, whoever hears my call. So we'll say, can I tell you where this comes up every single year? It's the following situation. You have a Baal Tokea who then goes to blow shofar for someone in their house afterwards. So this is incredible. If the Baal Tokea blows shofar in shul, his kavana is, I'm willing to be motzi anyone who hears my kolos. When he shows up, at Mrs. Schwartz's house after davening to blow shofar for her, he has to have specific kavana for her. So it's really, and again, if he doesn't have specific kavana for her, in fact, again, it may actually be a problem in her ability to discharge the obligation. So same Baal Tokea, but same Baal Tokea is serving in two different capacities. A communal shliach tzibur Baal Tokea versus a private Baal Tokea. I'm both saying, and again, the Shulchan Aruch writes this, and the Shulchan Aruch says, this is in Tav Kuf Pei Tes, Sif Tes, Tav Kuf Pei Tes, Sif Tes, Misha Takav Niskavi Lahotzi, Kala Shomea Tkiyaso, V'Shama Shomea Niskavi Lases Dechabaso, Afa Pish Ena Tokea, Miskavi Laploni, Afa Pish Ena Tokea, Miskavi Laploni, Zesh Shama Tkiyaso, V'Nei Yodea, Yotza, Shar Niskavi Lahotzi Lachomi Shishma'enu. So both say, so halacha l'maisa, the Shulchan Aruch writes this, that if somebody blew the Baal Tokea blew the shofar, and he has intention, whoever hears my tikiyas, I have das, to be motzi, whoever hears it. Now the chiddush is, this Baal Tokea doesn't know what? He doesn't know who's going to hear. He doesn't know who's in shul. He doesn't know who's passing by the open window. He doesn't know. But nevertheless, his kavan is to be motzi anyone who hears his tikiyos. Shulchan Aruch says it works. Lefichach, Mishaya Mahalich Baderech, O Yoshe Besoch Beso, Vishama Tekiyos, Mishliach Tzibor, Yata. So I'll say, what I just want to point out is something very interesting. According to this approach, and then we'll move on. So if you were to walk by shul, and you walk by, the windows are open, and you hear Tekiyah Shofar, are you Yotzei? Yes, you're Yotzei. If you were to walk by Mrs. Schwartz's house after davening, and the Baal Tokea is and you walk, and the windows are open, are you Yotzei? Bepashtos, no. Now, could it be that in that case the Baal Tokea also had kavana to be motzi? Yes, but I'm sorry.
It seems like you should.
So you could get, meaning Menachem's timing that every Baal Tokea should just in general have das. That whenever you're blowing shofar, just have in mind. You know what I say to that? People should have in mind a lot of things, right? all the time. Yes, right? The answer is it could work. But situationally, we are assuming that when you're blowing in a private house, you're blowing dafka for that person, not for the tzibur. So again, just really fascinating. So that's why, again, about saying, now you go back to the Mishnah, now you understand the Mishnah's case is very specific, right? The Mishnah doesn't say you're walking outside and you hear Tekiyah Shofar, right? What's the Mishnah's case? You're walking by a shul. You're walking by a shul and you hear Tekiyah Shofar. Im kiven libo. If you have kavana to be yotze, you're yotze. See, because again, all we need is for you to commit. Because the shliach, the Baal Tokeh has already committed. Because since he's blowing in shul, he has the din of a shliach tzibor. He has a mind to be motzi anyone who will hear us tekiyas. Incredible halacha. Let's say Mishnah. Beautiful, beautiful Mishnah. Vaya kasha yare Moshe yado v'gavar Yisrael. Shabbos say the Gemara now quotes it. Actually, I want to say something beautiful. It's not so often that you have agadata in the Mishnah. So it's always very exciting when we see an agadata Mishnah. So the Mishnah says as follows: Vasher kasha yare Moshe yadav v'gavar Yisrael. So we'll say the pasuk over is talking about the war with Amalek. And the pasuk says, Yado. Vayakasha yare Moshe Yado v'garvar Yisrael. When Moshe Rabbeinu would raise his hands, we also remember the story. Right? Moshe sends Yoshua to lead out the army. Moshe Rabbeinu was perched on a mountaintop overlooking the battle. And the pasuk says, when Moshe Rabbeinu would raise his hands, v'garvar Yisrael. Ultimately, again, Klal Yisrael would be victorious. V'chasher yaniach Yado v'garvar Amalek. When Moshe would lower his hands, Amalek would win. So it says the Mishnah, V'chi yadav shel Moshe osos milchama o shovras milchama. Do Moshe Rabbeinu's hands, do his hands determine the outcome of war? What does that mean? Moshe Rabbeinu's hands are outstretched, Klal Yisrael wins. Moshe Rabbeinu's hands are down by his side, Amalek wins. Are the hands of Moshe the determinant of the success in battle? Elalomer Lecha teaches an incredible lesson. Kol zman sheyisrael mistaklin klape maylo. Umishtabdin eslibam lavim shabashamayim hayu miskabrin. Both say this is so beautiful. Moshe Rabbeinu's hands were not an ends; they were a means to channel Klal Yisrael's hearts heavenward. When Moshe Rabbeinu had his hands outstretched, he was pointing towards Shamayim, and he was saying, "Klal Yisrael, put your faith in the Ribono Shel Olam." And when a Yid puts his faith in the Ribono Shel Olam, he could overcome any Amalek. The hands were the channel. They got Klal Yisrael to look upward. Ve'im lav. But if Klal Yisrael did not put their faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, noflim. Unfortunately, again, we are unsuccessful in the battles of Both say, by the way, why is this Mishnah here? Why is this Mishnah here? Because what was the last topic? What was the last topic? Kavana. Kavana, right? Shliach Tzibur, yes. But it was about Kavana. That's the topic of this Mishnah. Kavana. Moshe Rabbeinu, when his hands are outstretched, he's saying, Klal Yisrael, put your kavana, put your faith, put your concentration in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When Klal Yisrael did that, they're successful. When they don't do it, we're unsuccessful. I will say, also, if you think about it, by the way, it's so beautiful. Let's read one more example. The Gemara says, a similar idea, Ata Omer, Aseh l'chasraf, v'sim oso al nes. So we'll say, the pasuk says over here, that go ahead, make a serpent and put it on a pole. Shabbos said this is talking about one of the times that Klal Yisrael complained against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the desert, there was a plague or an outbreak of snakes, fiery serpents. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, make a serpent, a copper serpent, wrap it around the pole, and you should do as follows, V'haya kol hanoshach v'ra osavachai. Anyone who got bitten by a snake or a scorpion, let them look, what we call the nechushtan. Let them look at this copper snake on the pole, and they will live. So the Gemara says, but I don't understand. The Mishnah says, I don't understand. Looking at a copper serpent determines if you're going to live or die. Ella bismanshi, so I'm mistakling klape my law, but the same idea will say, you see, the nechushtan, the copper serpent, was perched at a height. So the idea is you were supposed to look up at the serpent and then by extension look up to Shamayim. Ela bizman sheyisol mistaklin klape milo. When Klal Yisrael looks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, umishabdin es libam lavin shel Shamayim, and we give our hearts over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hayu misrapin, we were healed. Ve'im lav, but if not, hayu nimukim, ultimately again, we would not be healed. Chashom, we would die. So both say, so two examples, the same ideas, the hands of Moshe and the nechushtan, the copper serpent. Neither of them affected success on their own, but rather what were they? They were a physical medium so as to allow Klal Yisrael to look up at Abba. You see this theme in Yiddishkeit. Where else do you see this in another positive way? Tchelas. Right? Why do we wear tchelas? Why do we wear the blue string on tzitzis? So the Gemara Maseches Menachos says, tchelas dom el yam. Right? The tchelas resembles the sea. Yam dom el rakia. The sea resembles the heavens. And rakia dom el kisei hakavod. And the heavens resemble the throne of glory. So the idea is, look, so we'll say, so why don't we save a lot of time? Why don't you just say Just look up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu said, went through the whole hands, up, down, up, down, up, down. Why don't you just go ahead and say, Klal Yisrael, you want to be successful in war? Look to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. People are afflicted with snake bites. Why not just go ahead and say, look to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be healed? Because Rabbi said, the Mishnah is teaching us, and the Torah is teaching us, an incredible yesod in Ruchnius. Most people can't go from earth to Kisei HaKavod in one moment. Right? Most people can't go from where I am right now to a deep and meaningful connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ruchnius only works when you take it in stages. And that's why, again, we're going to come to it. This week's parasha. Vayetzi Yaakov, right? Yaakov Avinu has his dream. V'nei sulam mutzav arza. And the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says, why a ladder? Because in Ruchnius, life is all about a ladder. It's a ladder, one rung at a time. When we know this, because there are times where we get super excited about Yiddishkeit, and we want to go right to the Kisei HaKavod, and then generally what happens? Right? You fall big time. Big time. The whole yesod of successful Ruchnius is small, steady steps. I may not be able to move as quickly as I'd like to, but what I do move, what I do accomplish, I'm able to retain. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching Klal Yisrael by Amalek. Look at my hands, follow my hands up to the heavens. Look at the Nechush and the copper serpent, follow it up to the heavens. Look at the Tcheles, look at the sea, look at the heavens, then you'll get to Kisei HaKavod. Ruchnius requires slow and steady steps. The difference why often we lose interest is because often we just want that spiritual kick, right? I want that inspiration. I want that feeling of accomplishment all at once. And like anything else in life, small and steady steps may not give you that elated inspiration every moment, but small and steady steps are the secret to success in one's ruchnius. The Gemara goes right, Mishnah goes weiter. Cheresh shot v'katan, ein motzi asam dechavasan. So I'll say cheresh shot v'katan. Cheresh is a deaf mute. Shota is someone who is insane. Now, again, we'll define these terms, but really, it's the katan and a child. The common denominator, we always group these three people together. Chashu, chereshot v'katan, is because they are assumed to lack mental capacity. That's the idea over here. So these people cannot be motzi anyone in Tikya Shofar. Right? Remember again, because they're not obligated, they can't be motzi. Zaklal, here's the rule. Kol she'enu mechuyev b'davar, eino motzi es harabim yedei chovasan. Anyone who is not obligated in a particular mitzvah cannot go ahead and discharge anyone else from that obligation. I will say, not unique by shofar, that's a din in Gan's Torah. Says the Gemara, here we go, Kol chayavim b'tkiyah shofar, kohanim levim v'yisraelim, gerim v'avadim v'shuchram v'tumtum v'androgynous, Listen to this list. Everyone is chayiv in Tikya Shofar. Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, Gerim, converts, Avodim Mishuchrarim. Then we'll say, what are Avodim Mishuchrarim? What are they? Jews. They're emancipated Avodim Kinanim, who effectively become Jews afterwards. Vitumtum. We'll say now tumtum and androgynous. Tumtum, what's a tumtum? Tumtum is a person who has a membrane covering the reproductive organs. So ultimately, again, unknown gender. Androgynous, ultimately, again, is someone who has both male and female qualities, not qualities, physical characteristics. And no conversing about this, right? And ultimately, again, someone who is half eved, half free. We'll say, how do you have a case of half eved, half free? Where an eved owned by partners, and one partner emancipated his chelik, the other partner did not. So let's go through this list. Here we go. So the Gemara says, Tumtum eino motzi lo esmino v'lo she'eino mino. So this is very interesting. A tumtum cannot be motzi anyone. Now, why can't a tumtum be motzi anyone? We'll say, because you see, a tumtum, the difference is either what? A man or a woman. We just don't know which one. In other words, the tumtum is gender specific. Just because there's a membrane that's covering up the sexual organs, reproductive organs, we don't know what it is. But it's either a man or a woman. So the problem is, you could have two tumtums, and what? One of them is a man, one of them is a woman, but you don't know. So halacha l'maisa, tumtum can never be motzi someone else because we're not sure of the gender of the tumtum. Next, androgynous motzi esmino v'lo esmino. Very interesting. We'll say, so now an androgynous. What's an androgynous? So both. So interestingly enough, an androgynous can be motzi another androgynous. Why? Because they're the same. But but androgynous can't be motzi anyone else. Listen to this. What about someone who's half eved, half free? Interesting. A chatzi eved, chatzi ben chorin cannot be motzi anyone. Why not? I was saying, not even another chatzi eved, chatzi ben chorin. Why? Because this is very interesting. Because the problem with the chatzi eved, chatzi ben chorin is that if he blows the shofar, so to speak, part of that kol emanates from a free man who's obligated, and part of that kol emanates from an eved who's not obligated. See, he can't be motzi anyone because that is not a pure kol of obligation. Not only that, he can't even be motzi another chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin. Why? Because we'll say a chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin, in order to satisfy the obligation of chatzi ben chorin, has to hear a kol that is 1,000% kosher. But if the kol comes from someone else who's a chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin, that kol is compromised as well. Pretty amazing. Amar hakolchem b'tkiyah shofar kohanim levim v'yisraelim pshita. So we'll say, okay. So the Brisa said everyone is chayiv in shofar kohanim levim yisraelim. Okay. In other words, that's pretty obvious. Ihani lo mechayiv man mechayiv. We'll say, can you imagine? What are we going to say? All of Klal Yisrael is chayiv in tkiyah shofar except for kohanim levim yisraelim. Right? Okay, if these guys aren't chayiv, who's that? That's Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara says, Kohanim is chayiv. The truth is, you're right. The Havamina is for Kohanim. That's through the Havamina. That the truth is, you might have thought that Kohanim should be parted from Tkiyah Shofar. Why? Listen to this. Yom Teruah Yelochem. The pasuk says it by Rosh Hashanah. It should be Yom Teruah. Man delese ela b'tkiyah dechad yom hu d'mechayiv. I might have thought, who's chayiv in Yom Teruah? The kind of person who only has Teruah once a year. Right? The kind of person who in his life only has Tkiyah Shofar once a year. However, Vahani Kohani Hol V'Isnu B'Tkiyas T'chol Shana. Kohanim, they have Tkiyas all the time. T'chsev Utekatem B'Chatzotros Al Olosechem. Every single time you bring an Olah, they're blowing the Chatzotros. So Kohanim are Shayich to Tkiyas all of the time. Maybe they don't have a Chiyuv on Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, again, the Gemara says, Kamash Malon, no. Kamash, even Kohanim who have the tikiyos all of the time will still be chayv in Rosh Hashanah. So what are you talking about? Mi dami hasam chatzotros hacha shofar. By the olos, they're blowing chatzotros. They're blowing trumpets, not a shofar. So the Gemara says, "Ela itzrich saradait chamina ha'olu tnan shavel hayovel l'rashan tkil l'brachas." So we'll say, since we learned before in the Mishnah that Yovel is compared to Rosh Hashanah for tikiyah and for brachas, right? We spoke about this. All the brachas except for the ones that refer to creation, which doesn't apply in Yom Kippur of Yovel. So I might have thought as follows. So since there is this connection between Rosh Hashanah and Yovel, I would have said as follows. One who has, the Gemara says, one who has a mitzvah, one who performs the mitzvah of Yovel, or shayach to the mitzvah of Yovel, should be chayiv in the mitzvahs of Rosh Hashanah. However, the Hani Kohanim hov lesnu mitzvah Yovel. Both say Kohanim have no shaychus to Yovel. Why do Kohanim have no shaychus to Yovel? Listen to this. This is fascinating. The Gemara says, "Disnan Kohanim uLevim mochrin liOlam v'golim." Both say this is incredible. Kohanim and Levim have different halachas when it comes to land redemption. See, I will say, depending on the type of land, right, the property you sell. So, for example, selling fields is one halacha, there's a window of redemption, or I should say, you can't redeem it before 2 years go by. Homes in walled cities, you can only redeem it the first year after the sale. These halachas don't apply to Kohanim Levim. Kohanim Levim have a right of redemption at all times. At all times. So you might have thought that since Kohanim and Levim, the Gemara is calling that the halachos of Yovel don't apply to Kohanim and Levim. So you would have thought that since the halachos of Yovel don't apply to Kohanim and Levim, therefore maybe they shouldn't be chayav in the tekiyas of Rosh Hashanah as well. Kamash Malon, no. Kamash Malon will say they do, and that's why the Brisa says, or the Mishnah said, the Brisa said, that Kohanim, Levim, and Yisraelim are chayiv in Tkiyah Shofar. Incredible. We'll say first of the wide lines on the bottom. Long daf, Baruch Hashem. So again, we saw in the Mishnah that a chatzi ben chorin, right, half slave, half free man, cannot be motzi anyone, not even another Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin. You understand why. Remember, the Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin is very interesting because the part of him that's a Ben Chorin can only be yotu with the Tkiyah Shofar that is absolutely halachically sound. So the problem is that when a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin blows the shofar, in that kol is mixed in what? Chiyuv and Pater, Evan and Ben Chorin. So you might have thought that Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin, they can make their own minyan and blow for each other. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So the Gemara says, this is incredible. Am Rav Huna, ula atzmo motzi. This is fascinating. Rav Huna says, but a Chatzi Eved and a Chatzi Ben Chorin can be motzi himself. In other words, he could blow the shofar for himself. I don't think so. Let's analyze this. Why can't the Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin blow shofar for another Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin? Because again, the part of him that's an Eved cannot be motzi the other part of the guy that's a Ben Chorin. Li'asmonami lo asi tzad avdus tidei umapik tzad cheirus tidei. Rabbi said this is wild. So ultimately, Rav Nachman says, Rav Huna, you're wrong. A Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin can't even blow the shofar for himself. Why not? Rabbi said this is incredible because for the Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin, the part of him that's a Ben Chorin needs what kind of kol? What needs what kind of kol? A pure halachically sound kol. The problems are both saying when the Chatzi Eved and Chatzi Ben Chorin, when he produces a kol, when he blows the shofar, that kol is a mixture of an Eved and a Ben Chorin. See, I will say, what an incredibly profound yesod. Sometimes in life, you could be so compromised that you can't even pull yourself out of the difficult situation. Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin is so profoundly compromised that he cannot extricate himself from his circumstances. We'll say, sometimes in life, you can navigate the way out of your problems, and sometimes you can't. And sometimes in life, it takes incredible courage to be able to say, I can't figure this out. I don't have a solution for this, and I need someone else who's a Ben Chorin, right? I need someone else who's not struggling with the same things I'm struggling with to help me find a pathway out. An incredible yesod. Elamar Rav Nachman. Af yatzmei lemotzi. Rav Nachman says, Chatzi Eved b'Chatzi Ben Chorin. Not only can he not go ahead and be motzi others, he can't even be motzi himself. Taina Machabraisa that supports this. Misha Chatzi Eved b'Chatzi Ben Chorin. Af li atzmo eina motzi. Rabbi said that is indeed how the Rambam paskins. That's halacha l'maisa. Chatzi Eved b'Chatzi Ben Chorin cannot be motzi others and cannot even be motzi himself. Tani Ava b'Rab Zira. Both say, so now that we're on this topic of being motzi other people, listen to this. So, kalabrachas kulon, afa pishe yatsa motzi. Both say, in general, by brachas, even if you're yotze, you can make a bracha again in order to be motzi someone else, in order to discharge someone else's obligation. Look at Rashi. Afa pishe yatsa motzi, sharikol Yisrael arevin ze bazeh. Because Rabbi says, it says Rashi so beautifully, because all of Klal Yisrael are Arevin Zebazeh. So we'll say there's an interesting discussion, two different gersos. There's Arevin Zebazeh and Arevin Zelozeh. And they mean two different things. I mean, it's the same concept. Rashi over here quotes Arevin Zebazeh. It's from a lashon of ta'aroves, a lashon of a mixture. Right? Call it Raven Zebazeh. We are all mixed together, and therefore, again, we're all part of the same unit, which means that if I have fulfilled my obligation, but you have not yet fulfilled your obligation, my obligation is still deficient as well, and therefore I have the ability to go ahead and make a bracha for you to allow you to discharge your obligation. The gears that says Kol Yisrael Arevin Zeh Lozeh is some lashon of arvos, a guarantor. We are each the guarantor for one another. What's the job of the guarantor? In the event that the borrower cannot make good on his pledge, the guarantor steps in. If there's a yid who needs something, needs to fulfill a mitzvah, I am his guarantor and could step in. It's so beautiful. So, however, there's an exception. There's chutz mibirkas halechem ubirkas hayayin, with the exception of hamotzi and hagofen, she'im lo yotza motzi vim yotza ina motzi. Where again, if I have not yet discharged my obligation, I can be motzi someone else. But if I already discharged my obligation, then I can't be motzi someone else. So, what does this mean? So, what the Gemara over here, what Ava Breid Reb Zera is making the distinction is as follows: there's a difference between what we call the birchas hamitzvah and a birchas hadnanin. Birchos HaMitzvah kishmo keinu is a bracha you make over a mitzvah. In a Birchos HaMitzvah, even if I have already discharged my obligation, I can make the bracha again in order to be motzi you. In Birchos Hananin, which are brachos just over pleasure, if I have not yet made my bracha, I can include you in my bracha. But if I've already made my bracha, I cannot make another bracha to be motzi you. So for example, it's a Sunday and I'm making hamotzi. Could I be motzi you? Could I discharge obligation with my hamotzi? What's the answer? It depends. What does it depend on? If I'm making hamotzi for myself, I'm sitting down to eat, and you want to be yotze with my bracha, I could have you in mind. But if you're coming over to my house for dinner, and I already made hamotzi, and you didn't make hamotzi, I can't make now a second hamotzi to be motzi you, because that's a berchos hanen. Same idea, right? Wine, everything. What happens, however, again, to use the same example of, let's say, Kiddush. Right? Kiddush, remember again, we'll discuss this, but the hagafen of Kiddush is a berchas ha-mitzvah. So if you go ahead and, I made Kiddush for myself, and then what happens? So then someone came to my house. Can I make Kiddush again for that person? Absolutely. Why? Because that's a berchas ha-mitzvah. So for a berchas ha-mitzvah, even if I discharged my obligation, it's happened to me on Shabbos. I made Kiddush 5 times. Shabbos morning. My wife pointed out to me no one else was new around, but okay, that was a different discussion. So interestingly enough, so that's the Gemara saying over here. So halacha l'maisa, for a mitzvah, you could be motzi someone else even if you were already yotze. For what we'll call a berchas hanen, just a stam bracha. And by the way, Rashi points out over here, Rashi says the Gemara's use of hamotzi and hagafen for birchas hanen is not specific. In other words, ushar birchas peiros v'reichami she'enon chova. These are non-obligatory brachos. It's just that what? Ele she'asr le'chanos mina olam hazeh below bracha. Ubazu ein kan arvos. See, I will say, this is incredible. The din of arvos, the din of mutual responsibility that allows me to be motzi someone else only applies when there's an obligation, when there's a chova. If there's no obligation, I will say, now remember, I have an obligation to make a bracha before I eat because I'm not permitted to go ahead and partake of the world without a bracha. But I'm not obligated to what? Eat to begin with. I remind myself this all the time, right? I'm not obligated to eat, right? I don't have to. See here the distinction? The din of arvos, the din of mutual responsibility, which allows me to discharge someone else's obligation, is only in a case of a mitzvah, of an obligation, but of what we call a reshus, regular everyday consumption, right? Or everyday pleasure, hano, is not an obligation, and therefore I cannot discharge someone else's obligation with my bracha. So by Rava raised the kasha, Amadeis, birchas halechem shal matzah, or birchas hayayin shal kiddush hayom mahu. Shabbos says, so now I gave it away a little bit. So the Gemara says, now say, listen to this shaila. So Rava asked, 1 second, what happens when worlds collide? Excuse me. What happens when worlds collide and you have a bracha of a mitzvah that is also what we call a berchas hanen? And for example, the hamotzi of matzah or the hagafen of kiddush. Can I go ahead and be motzi someone else? I'll give you an example. Like the typical example would be l'shmoa kol shofar, right? Or al mikra megillah. So those are clearly berchos hamitzvah. So what we just learned is that halacha l'maisa, even if I blew the shofar, now I'm going to blow for someone else, I can make the bracha for them and be motzi them. Okay, whether they should make their own bracha is a whole discussion, right? I read the Megillah in shul, I'm now going to read the Megillah for someone else, I'm allowed to make the bracha for them again. That's a pure birchas hamitzvah. Lahadlik ner shal Chanukah, it's Kislev, I could be motzi someone else with my bracha. What about halacha l'maisa, where the birchas hamitzvah is a bracha over a food item? Borei pri hagafen by kiddush. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz by, he says by matzah. I want to say lechem mishnah because it's michas chaver, right? Right? By matzah. What's the halacha in those cases? Ma'u kevan dechovahu mafek. Do we say that since these brachos are part of a mitzvah, therefore again I can discharge someone else's obligation with my recitation? O dilma bracha lav chovahi. Or maybe Rabbi will say, remember again, this is very interesting. What happens if you don't have wine? Do you still make kiddush? Absolutely. Absolutely. What happens if now, again, matzah not, right? Matzah not. You're not going to make obviously alachi less matzah without matzah. So the Gemara says, so do we say, O dil bracha lav chovahi, tashma, da amra bashi, ki abina beirat papa, listen to this. Have mekadosh lon, listen to this. So Rashi says, when we were at the house of Rav Papa, so he used to make kiddush for us. V'chi hava asi arise midabra, when his sharecroppers would come in, so the sharecroppers were often working like right until Shabbos started. So they would come to the Suda a little bit late. The Jewish sharecroppers, Havim Mekadesh Lahu. Rav Papi would make Kiddush for them again. Which I will say, by the way, is two very interesting halachas. Number one, you see over here that in the house of Rav Papi, one person was making Kiddush. I will say it's very important. You know, there are different minhagim by Kiddush, and some mishpachos do have the minhag that different people make Kiddush, but really, me'ikar adin, it is better to have one person recite Kiddush for everyone. That is the concept of Berov Am Hadras Melech. That is the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is better served when everyone, again, person has a family minhag, to the contrary, keep your family minhag. But Lamaisi says, even from over here, that everybody's at Rav Papi's home, Rav Papi made one Kiddush. There was one Kiddush, and not only that, when the sharecroppers came in late, he made Kiddush for them again. So you see clearly from this story that what? That the Borei Priagafen of Kiddush doesn't really have the din of a Birchos Hanen. Right? It doesn't have like a regular, like din of a regular brach over pleasure, like it does over the week, but rather again, the Borei Priagafen of Kiddush is transformed into a Birchas HaMitzvah, and therefore halacha lemaisa, you could discharge someone else's obligation with it. So we'll say a person should not go ahead. Now, lo yifros adam prusa le'archen means over here, if you look at Rashi, lo yifros, last Rashi, birchas hamotzi kida amr le'el, she'ina chova aleim, v'lo yochlu v'lo yivarchu. So we'll say, so a person, if let's say people are at my home, not Shabbos, people are at my home, I shouldn't make hamotzi for my guests. Lo yifros adam prusa le'archen, ele imkin ochel imohen. Unless, of course, we're all eating together. Aval pores hu lebanav v'lebnei beiso k'dei lechancha b'mitzvos. But what I can do is, I can go ahead and make a bracha for the members of my household in order to go ahead and what? In order to train them in doing mitzvahs. U'b'halal b'megillah afa pisha enomotzi and pshiatzamotzi and b'halal megillah halacha l'maisa. Even if I've already been yotzei, I have the ability to go ahead and make a bracha again in order to be motzi others. So I will say, so again, what the Gemara is teaching me over here is as follows. I just want to point out, technically speaking, you can have a situation where even during the week, if people are koveya su'uda together, if they're having a meal together, one person could make hamotzi and be motzi everyone else. It's the same idea if people are drinking wine together as a chabura. One person can make hagafen and be motzi everyone else. We're generally not knowing that way, except on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. So for our general approach in halacha, is the only time you could be motzi someone else in a bracha is when it's called a birchas hamitzvah, when there is an obligation. Now the unique part about Shabbos and Yom Tov is that even brachas like hagafen and hamotzi are transformed into birchos hamitzvah. So that's why I can be motzi someone in Kiddush on Shabbos, even if what? Even if I already made Kiddush 4 times, right? Even if I already made Kiddush multiple times, I can still be motzi someone else. Same thing with hamotzi. Now by hamotzi, we don't generally do this, right? By birchas hamotzi, whether by lechem mishnah or by matzah, you wouldn't make hamotzi again to be motzi someone else. See, by Kiddush, if someone comes late to the Suda and I want to make Kiddush again for them, I could do that. I wouldn't make hamotzi again to be motzi someone else. But if everyone's sitting at the table with me, they could be yotzi my lechem mishnah. They could be yotzi, technically speaking, my alachilas matzah. Because again, on Shabbos and Yom Tov, these brachos are transformed into birchos hamitzvah. But during the week, you really would not be motzi someone else in birchos hanen. There's an exception ultimately if you want to train your children in mitzvahs. Parent wants to train their children in mitzvahs, al tzchinuch. You can go ahead and make brachas with your children, be motzi your children. But me'ikar adin, it does, by birchos hanen, and everybody makes their own. Hadron aloch, ru'u beis. We'll say, mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov. Yom tov sh'rosh shchalios b'Shabbos. We'll say, it's an incredible Gemaras ahead of us. Yom tov sh'rosh Hashanah shchalios b'Shabbos. If Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, what's the halacha? But mikdash hayu token avaloba medina. They would blow shofar in the Beis Hamikdash, but not outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, we'll say Rashi says over Loba Medina means Lo B'Yerushalayim v'Lo B'Gvulim. We're going to see this as a little bit of machlokes in the Rishonim, but we're just going to go with Rashi's pshat right now. That when Rosh Hashana fell out on Shabbos, the only place they would blow shofar would be in the Beis Hamikdash itself, literally in the Beis Hamikdash. But outside of the Beis Hamikdash, even in Yerushalayim, they would not blow shofar. Mishachara Beis Hamikdash, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan was Rabbi Yochanan. We're going to learn a lot about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Mamish saved Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted Shutokin b'chol makom sheyesh bo beis din. He instituted a very interesting practice that you could blow shofar wherever there is a beis din kavua, right? Wherever there is a real setup, a real organized beis din, you could blow shofar there. Blow shofar there. And therefore, again, Shutokim b'chol makom sheyesh bo beis din. Amar Rabbi Elazar, lo hitzim Yochanan ben Zakkai ela b'yavne bilvad. So we'll say a little of historical machlokes. Rabbi Elazar says no. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai only allowed for the blowing of shofar in Yavne. Rabbi Elazar say what was in Yavne? What was in Yavne? The Sanhedrin. Remember again, Rashi points out there El b'Yavne shahais Hashem Sanhedrin gedola b'yamav v'chein b'chol makom shagolsa Sanhedrin aval lo b'beizin shel esrim u'shlosha. So Rabbi Elazar says no. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai only said that wherever the Sanhedrin is, that's where you could blow shofar even on Shabbos. So therefore, both say, remember the Sanhedrin was exiled to a variety of different places. Usha, Yavne. So Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Yochanan only allowed you to blow shofar on Shabbos in the presence of the 71-member Sanhedrin. But even if you have a 23-member court that's established, you cannot blow shofar there on Shabbos. So it says the Gemara, Amrulo, they said to Rabbi Elazar, Echad Yavne ve'echad kol makom sheyesh bo beis din. Not Rabbi Elazar, you're wrong. Rather, again, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai allowed you to blow shofar. Now, both say, now I want to point out, it's clear from the Mishnah, you can't blow the shofar just with any beis din, meaning you need at least a 20, it sounds like you need at least a 23-member beis din. You need still a significant beis din. Va'o zos, ha'is yushan yisir al Yavne. And I both say, furthermore, again, Yerushalayim, when the Sanhedrin was in Yerushalayim, there was an additional benefit over Yavne. Shekol ir shehi roa v'shama'as ukrova v'yichola lava token. So b'Yavne v'haya token ela b'beis din bilad. I will say very interesting. When the Sanhedrin was in Yerushalayim, any city that was either again able to see Yerushalayim, really means the Beis Hamikdash, Yerushalayim, the Sanhedrin, right, and was able to see it, heard the shofar from where they were, krova, was close physical proximity, and could come be a chol lava. Again, we'll discuss all of these criteria. Would also blow on Shabbos, but by Yavne, it was only in Yavne itself that they were able to blow on Shabbos. So we'll say, let's analyze. So we'll say, before we get into the specifics, the Gemara clearly is operating with the principle that what? You can't blow shofar on Shabbos. Menhani mili. Why not? Where do you know that we don't blow shofar on Shabbos? Amar Rabbi Levi bar Lachma, Amar Rabbi Chanan bar Chanina, Kasav Echad Omer Shabbason Zichron Shua. One pasuk says Shabbason, a day of Shabbos, a remembrance of the Trua. Shabbason Zichron Shua. The Kasav Echad Omer Yom Teruah Yiyalachem. And the other pasuk says Yom Teruah. So we'll see here what's happening over here. One pasuk says Zichron Shua, a remembrance of the Trua, and one pasuk says Yom Teruah. So which one is it? To which the Gemara says, Lo Kashya, Kan B'Yom Tov Shechalios B'Shabbos, Kan B'Yom Tov Shechalios B'Chol. They will say, when Rosh Hashana falls out on a weekday, then what? It's Yom Teruah. When it falls out on Shabbos, it is Zichron Shua. Zichron Shua means we remember the Tkiyas, but what? We don't blow them. To which the Gemara says, 1 second, Amar Rava, Imidar Aisahi, B'Mikdash Hechi Takinon. But 1 second. If it's asim da'araisa to blow the shofar on Shabbos, then how can you do it in the Beis Hamikdash? But say, remember again, in the Beis Hamikdash, what doesn't apply? Shavusim, right? Rabbinic law. But biblical law, the truth is, it's true. Certain elements of biblical law, for example, you're allowed to shech karbanos, right? Shechita is an issa da'araisa. So that's in the Torah says you're supposed to do it. But in general, biblical law applies in the Beis Hamikdash. So now if you're telling me that it's asim da'araisa to blow shofar on Shabbos, how can you blow in the mikdash? Va'od halav malachihi it's furthermore, I will say, blowing shofar is not a malacha. Now, what does that mean? Listen to this. This sounded the Talmud Rabbi Shmuel. Listen to this, because again, Talmud Rabbi Shmuel said, "Kol meleches avoda lo sasu." Rabbi say on Shabbos, what are you not allowed to do? You can't do meleches avoda. So what does that come to exclude? So the Gemara says, Yotzasa tkiyah shofar. This comes to exclude blowing of the shofar. Or redias hapas. So Rabbi say, interestingly enough, redias hapas means the removal of bread from the oven. That these things, shichachma ve'ena malacha. These are considered to be wisdom, but not malacha. See, Rabbi say, the definition of malacha is a dynamic, constructive act. A dynamic, constructive act that the truth is really somehow alters physical reality. The blowing of the shofar and blowing the shofar is not a malacha. What is it? It's chachma. Right? It's chachma. You have to know what you're doing. But it's right, because we'll say, what do you create when you blow the shofar? What do you create? Right? Sound, which means you're creating what? Nothing. You're creating nothing. Malacha by definition means the creation of something substantive and tangible. Similarly, the removal of bread from the oven. That's how we'll say it's interesting. Remember, when they're talking about making bread, how are you making bread? Right? You're sticking it on the side of the oven, on the floor of the other side of the oven. So to get that out in one piece was a chachma. But it's not a malacha. It's not a malacha. So if Rabbi say, if going ahead and blowing shofar is not a malacha, then why should it be aser midaraisa? So the Gemara says, Amar Rava, here we go. Midaraisa mishra shari. You're right. In reality, blowing shofar is mutter on Shabbos, midaraisa. Let's say, here we go. V'rabbanon hu de gazer be kiderabba. Famous gezerah derabba. Damarabba. Hakol chayavim b'tkiyah shofar. V'ena kol b'kim b'tkiyah shofar. Because Rabbi says, everyone is obligated in shofar. What's the problem? Everyone's obligated, but what? Most people don't know really how to blow shofar. Rabbi say, remember again, tkiyah shofar is not just about belting out sounds. Right? There's very specific sounds to be sounded in very specific ways for very specific amounts of time. There is an incredible amount of halacha that goes into knowing how to blow tkiyah shofar. Anyone could produce sound from a ram's horn, but how to produce halachically valid sounds, most people do not know how to do. What's the concern? Gezerah shema yitlena biyado, v'yelech etzel habaki lilmod, v'yavirenu dalet amos b'rishos harabim. Wow. So I've said, the Gemara says like this, you're right. Biblically, midaraisa, can you blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah? The answer is yes. Because shofar is not malacha. Shofar is chachma. So why is it asr on Shabbos? Gezerah derabba. Out of a concern of carrying. That's the concern. That you may inadvertently come to carry your shofar on Shabbos, and you may come to carry it more than Dalet Amos in a public domain. Why are you carrying it? To take it to someone who knows what they're doing. And I'm taking it to the Baal Tokea. And I make, in the pursuit of trying to perform a mitzvah, I may end up going in and transgressing a malacha. People say this is what's called the Gzeira de Rabbah. The Gzeira of Rabbah, the Gemara says, V'hainu taima de Megillah. And it's the same reason why we don't read Megillah on Shabbos. Same idea. Because most people are not proficient in reading Megillah. The concern is if I have to read Megillah on Shabbos, I may come to transport the scroll. Ultimately, again, Dalet Amos, in order to go ahead and take it to a Chacham to read it. So therefore, I both say, now it makes sense. Therefore, in the Beis Hamikdash, they went ahead and they blew shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. And the Rabbanans do not apply in the Mikdash. So halacha l'maisa, they blew in the Beis Hamikdash, but you can't blow outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Also, we'll just do two more lines. Then we'll stop. Mishacharav Beis Hamikdash, his Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So we'll say, now remember the Mishnah said, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted that you should blow shofar in any place where they have a Beis Din. Any place where they have a formal Beis Din. Tanah Barabah say, get ready, this is an incredible Maisa. Tanah Rabbanon, Pam Achas Chal Rosh Hashanah Lios B'Shabbos. One time, and Rabbi say, this story is taking place after the Churban Beis Hamikdash. This is such an incredible story. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and what happened? So Rosh Hashanah fell out on Shabbos. Vayukala Arim Miskansin, and what happens? Everybody was gathering. We'll say, so in other words, all the locales around Yavna. So the Sanhedrin, the High Court, is in Yavna, right? All of the surrounding cities gathered on Yavna on Rosh Hashanah that fell out on Shabbos. Okay, now watch the story. Get ready for this. Is there enough build-up for this? Enough build-up? You feel the tension? So it says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lebnei Beseira, Niska. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to Bnei Beseira, we have to blow shofar. Rabbi say, Bnei Beseira, the sons of Beseira, were the heads of the Jewish people. Rashi says, Bnei Beseira, Gedolei Hadar Hayu. They were the Gedolei Hadar. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, okay, everyone's here, gathered, we have to blow shofar. Niska, Amr Lahem Nidon. Bnei Beseira said, not so fast. Let's go ahead. Rashi says, Nidon, Im Yesh Ligzor Af B'makom Beis Shema Yitlenu. So Bnei Beseira said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, calm down. Let's analyze this sugi a little bit. Also, I just want to point out, this, they say, the Maharsha brings down that this is after the Churban, after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Everyone is gathered in Yavne to hear the shofar. Remember, I said the same Chevra, probably just a few years earlier, was gathered in the Beis HaMikdash and heard shofar in the Beis HaMikdash. So everybody is coming to Yavne to hear the shofar. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, blow the shofar. Bnei Beseira say, whoa. Let's talk about this, right? Let's have a shir. Let's have a charus. We have to hear about it. So listen to this, Rabbi say, Amar lahen, miska v'achar kach nadon. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, I'll make you a deal. Let's blow the shofar first, and then we'll talk about it afterwards, right? And then we'll analyze afterwards. Let's blow now, we'll analyze afterwards. So for some reason, Bnei Beseira agreed to this, because remember, after all, Bnei Beseira were Gedolei Hadar, so is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, blow the shofar, but he promised them, we'll blow first, and then I promise we'll analyze the sugya afterwards. The Achar Shetaku, Amru Lo Nidon. So after ultimately they blew the shofar, they agreed to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. After this, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, okay, let's sit down, let's talk out the sugya. Amr Lahem, I'm so sorry, Kevar Nishma Karen B'Yavne, Ve'in Meshivin La'achar Maisa. Right, Kevar Shamu Karen B'Yavne. They already blew the shofar in Yavne. Once you did it already, you established precedent, and once you establish precedent, there is no longer anything to discuss. Rashi says, "Ve'in meshivin la'achar ma'isa kinayhu shenot silas tomas menu." Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, "What are you going to do? We're going to analyze it now, and we're going to say, we paskin that we don't blow the shofar in Yavne. You just blew the shofar in Yavne." So there's a foregone conclusion now. Is what Rabbi said. What's happening over here? So you have to understand who Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the man who had to pick up the pieces in the aftermath of the Churban Bayis. He had to pick up the pieces of Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the one who is responsible for the takonos of what we call Zecher l'Churban and Zecher l'Mikdash. Zecher l'Churban are the practices that get us to remember that which we have lost. Zecher l'Mikdash are the practices to get us to anticipatorily pine for the Bayis Shlishi. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is sitting here in Yavne, and he sees the Jews gathered. And who's gathered in Yavne? All the Jews who lived through Churban, all the Jews who lost family members, all the Jews who saw the Beis HaMikdash go up in flames, and they're gathered for one thing, and that's what? Blow the shofar in Yavne on Rosh Hashana on Shabbos. Show us that there's a future. Show us that there's hope. Recreate the practices in the Mikdash. And Bnei Beseira says, let's talk about it. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, there's a time to talk, and there's a time to act. There's a time to discuss, and there's a time to do. And now, when Klal Yisrael is in such existential danger, now, when things are so difficult, now when people are so tzibrochen, they're so broken, now is the time to act. Now is the time to lift the spirits. Now is the time to move the people forward. So does he employ a little bit of subterfuge? Absolutely. Because sometimes difficult times require, it's just passing Spanish. Yaakov Avinu did it also. Sometimes difficult times require you to go out of your comfort zone a little bit. Fine, we'll talk, I promise, we'll talk. Do this all the time. Yeah, we'll talk, for sure we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it afterwards, right? Right, we'll talk about it, I promise, right? So do it, and then once it's done, there's not that much to talk about. Shabbos has such an incredible Musar HaSkil in life. There are times to talk, and there are times to deliberate, and there are times to ponder, and there are times to hear other points of view, and there are times to take into account other opinions. And then there are times to just yes everyone and move forward. Because at the end of the day, sometimes things in life just need to get done. And not everything can be done by consensus. And not everything can necessarily have broad buy-in. But sometimes if something needs to get done, you have to stop perseverating and deliberating and just have to act. Now again, there are times in life where you have to deliberate, and there are times in life where you have to discuss, and there are times in life where you have to try to onboard mass support. Knowing when to employ which model in life requires an incredible amount of pikhus, an incredible amount of life wisdom. There's a time to onboard, deliberate, and discuss, and then there's a time to act decisively. We'll stop here. Rachel will continue tomorrow. Incredible Gemara ahead of us the next week.
After the show in Chicago, I guess some parts of the Midwest, they had a traditional movement that those type of shuls, even some good earlier don't let them have that. I was thinking this, that it was after the show, and they did it to keep Jews.
Right.
You know, I wonder, like, what they... Be well, Rick.
Have a safe trip, Mom.
All right,
say some shalom. Enjoy.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
What
sometimes.
What gave them, what head there was there that they could have such a minyan?
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to salvage what you can salvage.
You know?
Very true. Shkoch. Good morning. Thank you.
This daf is totally full of those things, and they're relating them to other gemaras. When you said that people can't go through things from every step, that's very much like the Gemara in Brachas, that when the Malka Esterson only Michal could do it in one step. That Ariel 2, Eliel was 4, so he's the only quasi-human. So it's much beautiful. When people need help doing things, in Brachas again, when Rabbi Yochanan helped heal somebody else, and when he got sick, someone else had to help him. So why couldn't he do it himself? Because the person can't get himself out of bed. I use that with my patients all the time. It's very true. Yeah. And the last thing that we just did with Sarah, you see the difference in the approach between Rabbi Yochanan and Hillel. That Hillel was tasked for not knowing value, and Rabbi Yochanan was so tolerant, and Hillel felt that punishment.
Very true.
And the other thing is that I'm sure you realize that in this cycle of the Rosh there's only one Rosh Chodesh, and it was the Rosh Chodesh on Friday and the Hashana.
That's great. I did not realize that, but that's great.
All right. Have a good day, a good week.
A wonderful day. Baruch to you. Good morning, Ali. Shalom Aleichem.
So the truth is the thing with the shofar, the kavana comes up with all the time with Shabbos.